how did you get to this idea? Where did you get this idea about, hey, I'm going to oscillate this crude protein, and this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
Phil, many years ago, probably 6-7 years ago, Norman St. Pierre worked at Ohio State then, and he and I were talking one day about why two herds that are fed about the same facilities, why can they differ so much in production? And one thing we thought about is maybe the higher producing herds just do things more consistently. The diet is consistent day to day. And, we've heard that forever, that, cows like consistency and so on and so forth, but there's absolutely zero research supporting that statement, zero. And so we set up a series of experiments where the basic design is we'd have a controlled diet that's a good diet and was as consistent day to day as we could make it. And then we'd have treatments that we varied. We varied the fat concentration, we varied protein, which we'll talk about today, we varied fiber, we just varied things. So we weren't looking at how the effect of concentration of protein, for example. What we looked at is if two diets are equal on average, but one is consistent and one isn't, does it matter? And that's where this started. And one of the first ones we did was a protein study. That was several years ago. And then we had some things we didn't really like. And so when Alex started here at his PhD, we wanted to repeat this, but do it better. And that's the paper that Alex will be discussing here in details. But the theory was, what we started with is that consistency would be better. What we're finding in all this study in total is that it really didn't matter, or inconsistency might actually be a little better. So, but I'll let Alex discuss the details of the experiment.
Okay, so Alex, how did you guys come up with the treatments assortment? So you have 109 MP, right? And
correct.
then you have a 95 MP, and then you have one that is oscillating. So pretty much you have two diets, and then you're kind of having three treatments out of those two diets, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the idea is can we use this oscillating method, so feeding a different concentration over a period of time, and then switching that concentration again for a series of time. We thought that would improve nitrogen utilization efficiency if we were feeding a diet that was marginal to begin with. And so that's why we chose those levels. We wanted an adequate diet that we could use as our control. And then the theory is if you reduce the MP to slightly marginal, that you'll add some efficiency when you oscillate the crude protein concentration day to day, and then that would improve the overall diet, and those cows would produce more milk than if you would just feed that same deficient concentration continuously.
There's some buildup here that actually you did that using 48 hours before, and then you decided, no, now I'm going to do 24. I think that's the right amount. What was that?
So originally this research kind of took off in growing ruminants and sheep and cattle. And what they found was 48 hours was basically an optimal time to oscillate for growing ruminants. But when we tried this a number of years ago, a master's student of Bill's had basically took the research straight from what they had found worked well in beef and sheep, tried to apply it in dairy cows, and it didn't exactly fit. And when we got to thinking about it and looked at this deeper, what we found is that our dairy cows, they lag about a day in what they eat, versus growing ruminants, it's probably closer to 2 days. And it makes sense when we think about how much more feed dairy cows are eating. I mean, that's how much faster the rumen turnover time probably is in a dairy cow versus a growing ruminant. And so to prove that, we did a little pilot study before we actually conducted this study. We fed different average levels of protein, and then we also changed the oscillation frequency. So we tested oscillating every 48 hours versus every 24 hours. And we basically confirmed in that little pilot study that 24 hours is in fact better for dairy cows. But also as part of that is the level of deficiency that you're oscillating also can affect production. So then from that pilot study, we basically came up with these treatments and then tested them in a study that we could more effectively say, yes, you know, in a commercial setting, this will work. And then we also, of course, evaluated other things like the digestibility, amino acids in plasma, as well as body composition, to fully understand, you know, how the oscillating crude protein method works, or to unveil, you know, more details of if it is an applicable thing on farms or not.
So at that point, you were at, in your pilot, you were at 95 as well? Or you tried lower, or?
So we tried two levels. The first level was 95, and then we also had tried, I think it was like 85% of the MP requirement. And when we oscillated 85% of the MP requirement, those cows did end up reducing their production. It was just too low of a concentration to maintain adequate rumen fermentation and amino acid supply, basically, for milk production.
I see. So the idea of reducing and oscillating and doing well means not losing milk production. That was pretty much a big goal, right?
Correct. Yeah.